Much of the last 3 years of my life has been a process of discernment. To me, discernment is a process of aligning yourself internally and externally such that your actions in the world align with your most essential self. This way we can make decisions that we can trust. It should be simple, right? You just ask yourself, hey self, what do we think about this? What should we do here? And self responds, I think that, we should do this, call me if you need me. If it's that easy for you, that's great. I'm happy for you. Take a nap. I will see you at 12:15 for after hour. For me, when I began my process of spiritual alignment, I asked questions of orientation to a largely undiscovered space, only to discover that inside me, inside all of us, resides a constellation. Internal Family Systems Theory, or IFS, refers to the units of our interior constellation as parts. As in, part of me wants to stop eating meat, and some part of me would rather stay in than go out to the club on the weekends. Some of y'all I saw at the club, no? Y'all are being really quiet right now because you don't want to get caught. But parts are more than preferences. Richard Schwartz and Martha Sweeney, in their book Internal Family Systems, describe parts as discrete autonomous mental systems, each with their own idiosyncratic range of emotion, style of expression, abilities, desires, and views of the world. In other words, discrete little beings that reside within us. I find the language of IFS theory especially helpful when thinking about parts of me that I don't like. For example, there's a part of me that can be obsessive, that can get fixated on something, unable to move on even when I should. There's a part of me that is anxious and prone to dark thoughts. Part of me that is indecisive, and another part of me that is frighteningly decisive to the point of impulsivity. There is part of me that is proud of what my body can do, and part of me that does not like to look at my body in the mirror. Maybe some of these examples resonate with you, and maybe they don't. Everyone's parts are different. I invite you to get to know yours. This is an IFS parts map. It's an exercise that you can do to visualize your parts, and if you're interested in after this, we can talk about it and I can point you in the right direction. In the center there is self, surrounded by all of the fun little parts. You may find that many of the parts within us that can have an oversized impact on the way we view and interact with reality are the result of trauma. In the words of Resmaa Menakem, trauma is not an event. Trauma is the body's protective response to an event or series of events that it perceives as dangerous. Our protective response is embedded in the oldest evolutionary part of our brain, what we jokingly refer to as our lizard brain. The fact is that even the most simple organism will react to painful stimuli. Trauma is the encoding of those protective responses in the base level programming of our nervous system before any actual thinking begins. This is what happens when you touch something hot and you pull your hand away and then you think, oh wow, that was hot. As a result, traumatized parts can override our logic because the trauma comes first. For example, I don't like pools, swimming pools. As a kid, I was pretty overweight, aka chunky, aka husky, and pools were a site of a lot of ridicule for being fat. Unfortunately, I got drugged to a lot of pools as a kid. Body shape is very rarely an actual problem. Bodies are different. They change and continue to change over the course of our life. That is life, right? But ridicule is painful. Repeated ridicule, as the definition suggests, is traumatic. So my lizard brain trauma encodes this logic into my brain-body system. Bullying for being the fat kid at the pool, painful. Therefore, fat, bad, pool, dangerous. Even now, 25 years later, when someone mentions going to the pool to hang out, I get physically irritable. I get cranky. There's nothing logical about that. It's just the trauma system trying to keep me safe from pain. But trauma doesn't just occur with direct experience. You can be traumatized by media. We all know that Latin men are not dangerous criminals and predators. But if the media predominantly portrays them as hyper-sexualized gangsters and drug dealers, and even the president himself repeats that language, some of it starts to seep in, even to us. Here's a self-check. Next time you walk past a group of Spanish-speaking day laborers at Home Depot or Lowe's, check in with your body. Are you at ease? What signals is your body sending you? That could be an improperly coded, erroneous trauma response. Trauma can come to us from culture, it can come to us from our parents, it can come to us from our ancestors, and it can stalk through generations, which is how we can end up with parts we don't recognize yet have serious influence on our feelings and behaviors. The first step to getting a handle on our parts, including our traumatized parts, and the first step to achieving spiritual alignment is to recognize that, in the words of Dr. Lee Butler, all parts mean well. They come from a good place. Our parts want good things for us. Our trauma wants to protect us, but trauma isn't logical. Trauma can't see context. It isn't capable of higher order thinking. We are. And that's the second key. All these parts of you are just that. They're parts. They are not you. IFS theory states that the essential self was born whole and good. It doesn't become good. It just is. This feels very true to me as a Unitarian Universalist. Part of accepting the inherent worth and dignity of every person means recognizing that every person has a core of good. Perhaps that core is completely occluded by trauma and bigotry, but it's still there, which means the potential for goodness is always present. When we're trying to make decisions or orient our actions in the world, we should endeavor to move in alignment with this most essential good self. Our ori, our atman, our soul. Now let me be clear, right now, I am not talking about any kind of rugged individualism. I've read Emerson and I have some notes. I think a good deal of the trouble that we've gotten into as a species has come from empowered individuals placing their wants and needs over everyone else. If anything, leading from self, this good core, it should enable us to better live and work in community with others, which is why the marker of this essential self, of soul, is compassion. Compassion. When you're confused about what's right, or when you're certain that you know what's right, and you want to double check, find compassion. Compassion will point your way both in decisions and in relationships, including the relationship you want to have with yourself. Last week I was walking across a bridge and I was looking at the cracks in the concrete when my mind went not to a memory, but to a feeling in my body that I could trace to a moment in the past, the physical memory of trauma. A time early in my CIA career where I was hurt, angry, embarrassed, and a bit decimated. The world had stopped making sense. I was between yelling and crying, and I defaulted to silence and professional decorum. All the while, on the inside, the storm was pulling the house down. Yet, in that moment, on that bridge, I chose to create a second feeling, compassion. I imagined the me of today into that memory. I let 38-year-old Ryan hug 25-year-old Ryan and tell him, hey, I see how hard you're working. I see you are in pain and confused. I know you don't know what's going to happen next, but I can tell you that we are going to be all right. It turned out that 25-year-old me and 38-year-old me really needed to hear that. Because as that wave of compassion passed through my body, I felt a little bit of that trauma go away. Now, I use the word compassion, not forgiveness or even love, for a reason. Compassion is an opening, an embrace. Compassion doesn't negate responsibility. It isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. Compassion can see harm, but it can also see context. Compassion knows that none of us are alone, disconnected, and untouched by reality. Compassion is possible even when love is out of reach. Can you show you, some part of you, compassion? The scared part, the helpless part, the traumatized part? What about the part that messed up? That made a mistake, or worse, did something to yourself or to others that you knew was wrong, that you knew was harmful, yet you did it anyway? Can you show that part compassion? Those can be the most painful parts to show compassion to. But that pain is good pain. That's the pain of healing. Bad pain comes from avoiding those hurt parts, letting injury fester and become infected, only to pass disease on to the next generation. If you can find compassion for yourself and for others, that voice, the giver of that compassionate energy, that's not a part. That's you. That's self. The goodness at the core of your being. So let's say you've begun to find self. You see your parts, even the ones you don't like, and you have compassion for them and other beings. Are you done? Have you achieved spiritual alignment? I humbly submit that there's one more part, one more step. Develop higher relations. Go to a source of goodness that is greater than you. Build closeness, and when needed, ask that source for help. For me, right now, that means cultivating an experiential relationship with the Orishas and the Holy Spirit while prioritizing my spiritual practice, capoeira. I don't know what that means for you. Your path to higher relations is yours to walk. And I can see that many of you have found a path based on the light that you give the world. But if you're looking for a way to get started, I have 2 suggestions. 1, look to your ancestors. What spiritual resources did they use to sustain themselves? Start there. Whatever they were doing, some part of it had to be life-giving. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But if you look back into your ancestry and you say to yourself, no way, I don't want any part of that. Fine. Put yourself into a new spiritual lineage. You have that right. You have that freedom. Find a new spiritual ancestors whose wisdom and endurance strengthens your own. And 2, get into your body. The body is the vehicle of our spiritual life. We need to engage it if we want to unlock the full measure of grace. Sing, dance, walk, run, pray, participate. Now, I know that the body is only ever temporarily abled. As life progresses, what we can do with our body changes, and no body is the same as any other body. But our spiritual practices can also change with us. And don't do it alone. Enlist others in your spiritual practice. Walk together, dance together, sing together, make music together. See what happens. I want to end today with a story. As many of you know, our dog Duke died. I don't know what to say about him to tell you just how truly special he was. Everybody thinks that their own dog is special, their own kid is special. But I'm telling you. The spaces that he has left in my and my wife's lives feel terribly big right now. I didn't mention this in the first one because my wife was here in the first one, but sometimes she'll still wake up and call his name. It's rough. Some of y'all got a chance to meet Duke. Raise your hand if you met Duke. Okay, cool. The reason why that is because soon after he got sick, I discovered that he loved coming to church, this church. Who knew? He'd sleep the whole way here, and as soon as we hit that little dip, that one right out there, he would wake up like this. And then I'd let him out the back, and he would walk himself over to the staff entrance, because he thought he worked here. He thought he had finally gotten a job. And I was going to stop bothering him about not paying for his own kibble. So one day we come in, and there was music coming from the sanctuary, and I wanted to see what was going on. Duke wasn't on a leash when we got here. I just kind of let him do his thing. But he followed me over to the sanctuary to find Paul Jorgensen playing on the piano. Paul told me that he never got around to learning piano when he was younger, but now in retirement, since he had time, he was learning. He had a special agreement set up with the church that he could play piano in the sanctuary during the week. I thought that was pretty cool, and I didn't want to interrupt him, so I turned around and I started to leave. And I make it nearly to the lobby when I realize that Duke is not with me. I turn around and I see Duke with his eyes on Paul's back, sit down and listen. A dog, my dying dog, sat and listened to Paul Jorgensen play piano as the sun streamed through the windows of the sanctuary. And I just stood there and I watched him listen. And I felt the kind of compassion that I can't describe to you in words. That divine moment was made possible by Paul's practice, not mine. And I'm very thankful. So find alignment, find compassion, find yourself, find spiritual practice that builds relationship with the transcendent. You will be blessed, and you will bless untold others. Ashe, amen.